Hello, British literature students. Welcome to the 12th week of the spring 2017 semester. So, this week we look at World War II and we look at Virginia Woolf. And Virginia Woolf, you'll have a Virginia Woolf reading in both her own and then, of course, in the World War II as well. So, first let's talk about A Room of One's Own. The discussion postings that I have for you are basically, one of them is why the Renaissance woman is silent during Shakespeare's time. And Woolf is going to talk about this a little bit. She's going to talk about how she was looking for any evidence of women from the Renaissance period in Shakespeare's time, and the only evidence she could have are the fictional characters created by Shakespeare and writers of his time that were heroic women. But the truth is, the average Renaissance woman was invisible. She was actually the property of her husband. And Virginia Woolf finds this very disturbing. It's not until the early 19th century, when we have authors like, say, Jane Austen and the Brontes, that a woman writer is finally actually to assert herself and actually be more than just a pulp fictionist, if she was allowed to write at all. The other part of A Room of One's Own is the Shakespeare's Sister portion, where Virginia Woolf is going to tell this little story about what would have happened had William Shakespeare had a sister who was just as smart as he was and just as creative as he was and just as good a writer as he was. There's no true evidence that Shakespeare had a sister of that sort, but Woolf is going to say that the actual repression of her creativity would have driven her insane and to the point of suicide. So how does this work? How does it work so that a woman who is brilliant could be repressed to a point where she decides that death is the only way out? So that's the Virginia Woolf posting. And we'll see Virginia Woolf again in the second posting of this week, which is the World War II notes. So, Virginia Woolf is going to make the argument in Three Guineas that women should have a country, or women should declare their allegiance to no country. And this is going on while England is at war with Germany and the Axis powers. Now, World War I was a horrifying event. So horrifying that it was believed that there would never be another war at all because of all the death and all the carnage and the psychological bad effects and so on and so forth that that war brought on. It did not take very long for Hitler to take over and start waging war on Poland and start waging war on particularly England. In 1940, there was something called the Battle of London. And in the Battle of London, Hitler used a blitzkrieg, if you will, where he took planes and flew them over London and dropped bombs on them incessantly. And the idea was to just pound England into submission, and then Hitler could have added England to his territory. England actually fought back, and this would be the first major defeat for Adolf Hitler. So, to England's credit, she helped turn the tide of war by pushing Hitler's Air Force, which was a very feared Air Force because it had been so successful in conquering other lands. England pushed that Air Force back, and that would be the first major defeat that Hitler would suffer, and then of course more would come later. So Virginia Woolf, though, during this time was saying, why should I be a patriot? If I marry a Frenchman, I become a French citizen. It wasn't until recently that women could own property in England, or women could inherit their father's fortunes, or that women were not the property of their husbands. It was only recently that women were given the right to vote in England. So she's saying England has not treated women well. Therefore, why should we cheer our soldiers on? Instead, war is horrible, and we should just declare ourselves citizens of no country. And she would call the women that would join this way of thinking the Outsider Society. And you can read about that in 3 Guineas. The other World War II reading I have for you is a very short poem, but it is Vergus Mein Nicht by Keith Douglas. And in this poem, what was once a man that fired bullets at a tank and ended up getting blown up by the tank, a couple of days later, these British soldiers passed by that area again, and there's this soldier, this German soldier that they had wasted, laying open to the elements and being eaten by maggots, and basically it was a gruesome sight. But he had a little diary with him, and in it there's a love letter from a little German girl, and it's just a poem that Douglas says, hey, even the German soldiers are human too, and they have girlfriends, and they have mothers, and they have people that love them at home just like people love us at home in England. So really, it's the idea that war was not because the soldiers hated each other. The wars were being waged by kings and chancellors, if you will. So that's this week's readings. World War II, get familiar with it. Read the Introduction to World War II in Volume F. And go ahead and look at the little slideshow I have and take a look at how World War II was even more horrifying than World War I. And then think about that as you do the readings for the World War II. So that's all I have, and if you have any further questions, you know how to reach me, and I will be glad to answer them through email or by telephone or by dropping in my office.